The reason why I love the message in Swedenborg's writings, I sometimes refer to them as like they've been my best friend, because whenever I get worried, whenever I get scared or feel like it can't work out, what it says in there about how what life is really about calms me, and it nurtures happiness and hope and puts me on a path where, yeah, I can feel powerful. I can feel like there's a point to life, and like there's something that it all is going to work out. Everything is going to be okay, and I can have joy.
My guest today is Curtis Childs, who creates videos around Emanuel Swedenborg, a theologian and near death experiencer from the 1600s. And his videos have reached millions of people. So, one of the concepts he talks about is how these techniques can help people solve problems that they previously thought were unsolvable. And today, we're going to learn all about that. So, Curtis, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk to you. This is so fascinating. And I watched your two most popular videos on your channel. They've reached like 5 million people. And you do things in a way I've never seen anybody do before with spirituality. So, for the people that are tuning in, before we started the interview, you said to me, hey, the world has missed something here. So, why would people want to take this precious time to watch this video today?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of seekers in the world. Everybody's seeking and trying to find, and I think there's generally broad categories of longing that people have. I think in the world, people are longing to see the harmony of science and religion, and or science and spirituality. How can they get along together? I think there's a longing for that. I think there's a longing for the intersection of rationality and spirituality. How can I have something that inspires and moves me, but also makes sense at the same time? And
Yeah.
I think people are looking for a story that explains not just one religion, but all the world's religions, and how the
Hmm.
whole of humanity fits. The information we're looking for, I think we've already got. And I think it happened in the late 1600s, mid 1700s. Emanuel Swedenborg, he was what everyone's looking for back before we knew we were looking for it. You said near death experiencer. So when Raymond Moody made up the term near death experience in the 80s with the book Life After Life, he went back and had a couple of sections in there on where are the parallels to this happening, because nowadays you just go on YouTube, they're everywhere. Everybody's having experiences. Everybody's talking about them. And when Raymond Moody first started, he was in hospitals and places where people were dying, and hearing these incredible stories back when no one wanted to really talk about them. He was saying, if this is happening so much all around, has it ever happened in the past? It should have, or it didn't. No way it started in the 80s. So he had some sections on what's the historical parallels. And there was like the Tibetan Book of the Dead had some similarities, the
Mm.
Bible had some similarities, and Emanuel Swedenborg, which
Wow.
nobody's heard of it. Everybody's heard of the Bible, and a lot of people have heard of Tibetan Book of the Dead. Nobody's heard of Emanuel Swedenborg, but that is the longest set of spiritual experiences ever recorded, the most complete, and the most accessible and consistent. This is absolutely an event in the history of human spirituality. But basically nobody knows that it's there because he fell into obscurity. I think it's a lot for people to take in, that there would be somebody who was Swedenborg was one of the leading scientists in the world who suddenly started having spiritual experiences and began to write about, study the afterlife in the same way he had been studying the physical world. People didn't know what to do with it. They thought he said he was crazy. They said that he had lost it. People made fun of him. But also, at the same time, he was saying things that upset the Christian church, because he was saying, you don't have to be a Christian to go to heaven. I've seen heaven, and heaven is a state of mind that's about living in love uh, toward your fellow human beings. So there's something to dislike about it for everyone. So I think it got swept under the rug. And now, though, I think the world has moved to a place where it's ready for it. So I'm trying to get everyone to know that there's incredible amount of really useful information in Swedenborg.
Well, there's going to be a lot to unpack here. We're going to dive in because I really want to understand this. So, one of the key things that I mentioned in your introduction is that Swedenborg has helped people to solve problems that they previously thought were unsolvable. So, can you give me a little bit of context about what you mean by that and what that means to the people that are watching?
Yeah, well, that's what's done for me.
Okay.
That's what it's done
Yeah,
for
then
me.
let's hear about your journey then.
Okay, I always knew about Swedenborg. My parents read Swedenborg. I knew that he was around, but there was, and I was always, I had some difficult things happen when I was young, and so I was always interested in the big questions in life. But when I first really started to use Swedenborg as a way to navigate my own mind, it was when I was probably 19, and I started to have depression, major depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive, just this. I didn't know it was called all that at the time, but I was just a mess. And I couldn't control my mind. I couldn't control my feelings. I didn't know how to navigate them. I didn't know what to do. And it was in there, I started to get really into near-death experiences then as well. And shortly after was when Swedenborg's ideas uh, came to life for me. I went from, oh, this is just some thing in a book, to this is describing exactly how my mind works. And when I do this, like he says you got to do, it works. Like it is, particularly with how to escape negative thoughts and feelings, and also how to soothe and get out from under worries and anxieties about life. I mean, those were like the life rafts that it threw me. But from there, problems that were previously unsolvable. Uh, when you live amongst members of the human race, it just seems like there's just things that are going to be impossible for us to get along about, or just like the little jealousies that we have and the little everything that makes it difficult. You think that's just going to be always part of life, but the way that he explains what existence is and how you look at it, it can actually neutralize that and get it so that there's a clear path forward to my life can be better because of everyone else that's in the world, and I can become happier and happier the more that I learn to help and serve people in a way that doesn't destroy my own ambition. It's just this amazing threading of this needle that I wouldn't have thought possible. So to me, like I every day, everything I look at, I'm looking through that lens, and it's absolutely solved all these problems for me that weren't previously unsolvable. And I've seen it do it for other people too. I've seen people will find our videos and they say, "Oh, this thing about why did bad things happen to good people? It bothered me my whole life, but now this is finally an explanation." Or how could, if God exists, how could there be all these other things, A, B, C? And they say this finally makes sense of that for me. I'm not saying it does that for everybody all the time, but it does it for some people, and those are the people that I'm trying to reach.
Okay, I heard we're gonna dive really deep in this because you said something that I think is a question that I hear a lot, and I know people I've heard near-death experiencers address this. So, why do bad things happen to good people?
There's what's temporary and what's eternal.
Okay.
So there's this thing that's called the parable of the horse. I don't know if you've heard, it's the Chinese parable of the horse.
Maybe.
I'll give you a short version because I think this
Okay.
perfectly illustrates to Swedenborg, the concept is what he calls divine providence. That there is a plan in everything, nothing is random. Everything is being guided by this divine intelligence, but you have to understand what you're looking for to be able to see the good that it brings out of it. The parable of the horse, I think, illustrates why bad things sometimes happen to good people. There was a farmer in ancient China and his son, and they were very poor and they had to work very hard, and they had a horse. And the horse was really important for their way of life. It was their most prized possession. And so this was their financial means of sustenance. One day, the son left the gate open and the horse ran out, and it got lost. And all the villagers came around and said, "Oh, that's terrible news. That's terrible news." And the son was upset, but the father said, "We'll see. We'll see." So the next day, the horse came back, and turns out it had made friends with two other wild horses. And so they opened up the gate, it brought them in, closed the gate, and suddenly they were 3 times richer than they had ever been in their lives. And so all the villagers came around and they said, "This is such good news. This is such good news." And the father said, "We'll see." The next day, the son was trying to train one of these new horses, but it was a wild animal, so it had never been broken before. And he got flung off the back of it, landed, shattered his leg. And so now he couldn't work. It was going to be very hard for that to heal. The villagers all came around and said, "That's so terrible." And the father said, "We'll see." And the next day, the army came through and said, we're conscripting all military age men to go and fight in this war against Mongolia. And the son couldn't go because his leg was broken. So he got spared from going and dying in that war. And all the villagers said, that's such good news. And the father said, we'll see. You don't know if something's good or bad till you know how it ends, or till you know its long-term impact. The premise that Swedenborg says he was able to observe clearly and with a level head is
You're
that
talking about on the other side. This is what he observed on the
this
other
is
side.
what, so he would go to, oh yeah, I guess if people aren't familiar with that, Swedenborg, it all started with dreams for him. I think he had little bits of spiritual experiences throughout his life, but in his mid-50s, he began to have these vivid dreams. And we know this because his journal of dreams is preserved. He was taking notes the whole time. He was even trying to psychoanalyze, what do these dreams mean for me? Which there was no such thing as psychoanalysis back then. This is pre-Freud, any of that. But he was saying, I think this black dog that keeps appearing in my dream means this. So he began to have these dreams. They got stronger and stronger. They turned into what he called preternatural sleep, which is, this isn't quite sleep. It isn't quite. But then eventually he began to have visions in a state of full wakefulness. So he started to have what we would now call out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, spiritually transformative experiences. And it culminated, he had a very powerful experience where he felt like he met God. He's got to have this window or door opened, and then it stayed open for the rest of his life. So for the last 30 years of his life, he was every day on command, able to travel at will to the afterlife, back again, have all these conversations, see all these things. And he spent the last 3 decades of his life exclusively studying that, writing everything down, describing it, and using the same brain. He was so smart. And this is not, you can go look up the highest estimated IQs in history. I don't know how reliable that is, but he's always near the top of the list. He was good at everything. He was a polymath. He was a Renaissance man. Anatomy, biology, mining. He was like a mining engineer. He was in the Swedish government, all those things. He took that mind. He was so used to writing things clearly and rigorously, and he took that and applied it to what he found in the afterlife. And one of the things that he was able to observe, and it was shown by, angels there and or whatever you want to call the people on the other side, was this thing called divine providence. And divine providence is this force that works in your life. And what divine providence does is it focuses on what is eternal about you and makes it so that anything temporary will contribute to a happier eternal state. So you have a spirit in a body. The conscious part of you is your spirit. So the part that's hearing me right now is your spirit. It's going through the body. There's a lot of physical stuff in between. There's a microphone up here, comes through your ears. But the part of you that hears it is, according to Swedenborg and many others, that's spiritual. And that can't die. That part can't die. The body dies, that part lasts forever. Hard things happen. The reason why hard things happen in the world is that people are allowed to go and do what they want to do. People can go and do what they want to do. And we make a lot of good choices and a lot of bad choices. And the bad choices bring harm into the world in all kinds of ways. I guess you could call it the free will argument. There is free will, and free will, because of how interdependent we are in this world and how interdependent we are in the afterlife, when people choose to harm each other, that can lead to all these cascades. That's why the broad reason why bad things happen. Divine providence, though, will not allow anything to happen unless ultimately good is brought out of it. Hard things that happen in your life, there's temporary pain in them and sadness, and I'm never going to try to discount that. And I would never, if somebody just lost someone they loved, I'd never say, it's all right. God has a plan for that. Like it hurts. And I've felt that hurt. Ultimately, though, the impact on who you are, what's universally acknowledged about hard experiences through psychology and everything, is that you grow deeper, and you often grow more empathetic. They change your spirit, your consciousness, your values, and your intentions. And that lasts forever because it's part of you that lasts forever. So the equation will always be that even though it seems chaotic, providence is using that to make you into the kind of person who can be happy forever. And so that is why bad things happen to good people. It's like sometimes it just can't be prevented, but ultimately good is going to be brought out of it. Things are only allowed to happen if ultimately good can be brought out of them.
So it's funny, while you were talking towards the end, I get this thing in my left ear where it feels like the hair standing on end. And I've learned over many, many years that that happens when I'm hearing a truth or something I need to pay attention to.
Nice.
So thank
Yeah,
you for that.
sure. That's cool. You've got that kind of, that's like your sort of litmus test. Oh, this is, pay attention to that. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right. So you touched on a lot of stuff there. And I think one of the things I want to talk about are concepts and terminology that we use in, this when we're on this spiritual path. One of the things that I've come to understand is my higher self. 18 profound out of body experiences where I have been on the other side and I've become my soul. So I understand that higher self. And one of the things that I feel is a truth that I've learned from that other side is that we actually plan a lot of these things, and we plan them even though they're going to be hard, knowing they're going to be hard because of what you talked about, because there's some kind of a good that's going to come out of it. And there's some kind of almost a refinement, I'm going to call it, of the soul. Like, we're perfect on the other side, but at the same time, they talk about these levels of like somebody who would be an ascended master versus somebody who would be, maybe they've only come to earth a few times, but they come here and they refine their soul and it levels them up. And I'm not talking about in a way that would be good, better, best, because on the other side that doesn't exist. So how does that fit in with what you've learned with Swedenborg's 30 years of journeys to the other side? Did he talk about that kind of, you called it soul, I'm calling it higher self, maybe it's a terminology thing. And I understand the part where God impacts everything, but I also have understood it's you can't take God out of the equation, but at the same time there are a lot of people who are like, God did this, God did that. But at the same time, I have seen that it's like my higher self, my higher self, my higher self. It's not ever disconnected from God, but it's not like God is saying, you're going to go out and have these experiences. It's my higher self deciding, with sometimes guidance of counsel and maybe God as well. But how does that fit in? I'm curious.
Sure. So, a couple of questions in there, and
Okay.
I think that according to Swedenborg, there's only one life. There's only one source of life. So, your higher self, where does it come from?
It
And
would
he
say,
actually, yeah, he says that there's like an inmost part in you that's I like to think of it like a sort of an estuary. Like an estuary is where like the river runs into the sea and you just can't quite tell where one ends and the other begins. So there's something in us that's, God is right there. And so that's where that light, Swedenborg talks about it like the sun shining on the earth. You got all these seeds sitting in the soil, and when the heat and light from the sun flows in, that's where the power, literally, that's where they get the energy to live. Swedenborg would say the same thing about and let's see, the term, I mean, he wrote in Latin, so any terms we're using are going to be translated, but certainly he talks about actually higher self and inmost self. There are layers to the human mind, which is just like the levels that you're talking about. He talked about heaven having layers, and again, he used traditional Christian terms for things, but often had very different definitions of what they actually were. But he talked about this, everything in the afterlife it's like consciousness based. There's a spiritual world and a physical world. The physical world obeys physical laws. Why are we able to have this conversation? Because all the electronics are obeying the physical laws. Why do I stay in my chair? Because of gravity. That's what runs stuff. Spiritual world, it's the laws of consciousness that guide it. For example, rather than gravity holding everything together, spiritually, love holds everything together. And there, when you have that, world operates like your mind operates, and feelings and thoughts there matter a lot. Whereas here, they, like, I can think as much as I want about anything in front of me. It can't actually change the matter. But the world of the spirit is this thing that's responsive to what goes on in your heart and mind. God is there inside everything that's good and true about everyone. That would include that. The refinement of the soul that you're talking about, I think that follows a pattern that you can just see for yourself everywhere in nature. If you want to get stronger muscles, what do you have to do?
Gotta lift weights and tear them first
You
before
gotta
they can
tear.
build.
They
Yeah,
gotta tear. They gotta tear. We don't go and watch movies about the hero who never has to undergo a trial, or that
true.
like this hero just everything was easy and got better and better. You have the day-night cycle where it's dark and cold and then it gets warm. You have this seasonal cycle. Everything moves according to those. Swedenborg described these very important periods in life that he called crises of the spirit. And these are times when things are difficult, and they can be difficult for different reasons for different people, but generally there's these big spiritual events happening within us and around us spiritually, and it feels like it can feel pretty miserable. It can feel like you're just losing it and it's devastating and you're struggling with despair and all. That is the only way that you grow. You have to go through those periods to have growth, which is, again, just like if you're going to exercise, if you're going to get better cardiovascular health, you got to run. And while you're running, it's miserable. But by the end, you're like, hey, this is feeling good, but you have to go through that. Those are that's physical examples of a spiritual, of a parallel to a spiritual process, which is, as you said, this refinement. Things can always get better. You could never grow in having more love or having more wisdom. That's the joy of life, is to pursue those things. That can never, we can never have it all, because there's an infinite amount, because the divine is infinite.
Okay. Wow. There was a lot of information in there. Let's talk about heaven because you mentioned the layers of heaven
Yeah.
and your, I think, number one most popular video on your channel is called What Happens Immediately After You Die. And I think everybody is infinitely curious about heaven. It's why they watch these stories about near death experiences, because people have touched something that's been talked about for eons. So, will you give us a little bit about what Swedenborg talks about? What is heaven? What are the layers of heaven? And what does, maybe you can summarize what happens immediately after you die?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like we're curious about what happens after you die, both because we know we're going to die, like what's going to happen to me, but also it's what's the point of all this? Like, where's all this going? It's a resolution to, like, there's so much that's confusing about life and perplexing, and I think what people are looking for is, what does it all mean? I think this was part of what, when I first was reading the classic near death experiences, that's part of what felt so good, is, oh, at the center of it there's this love, and everything happens for a reason, and our lives actually are very carefully watched over, and you go back and see these events. That's a resolution. That feels like a resolution. So I think that's why people are looking for it so much. I do think a lot of people, when they experience grief, they'll come onto YouTube, and all the time I hear people say, I lost so and searched for what happens after we die, and your video popped up, and that's how I came into it. So it's no surprise that a lot of people are watching that video. Heaven, as I said before, the spiritual world follows spiritual laws. So their thoughts and feelings, which Swedenborg asserted that the things you feel and the things that you think, that is happening in your spirit. There's certainly activity in the body that goes along with it, but the spirit is where you actually experience those things. So that their feelings and thoughts actually create the world around you, because it's a consciousness-based world. So if there's what you love and what you believe really shape things over there, whereas here you can be living in your next door neighbor, you don't know what kind of person they are. I mean, you can sort of guess, but who knows? There you can, what you love determines like who you go toward and who you hang out with. And according to Swedenborg, there's a state of mind that's called heaven. And the state of mind in heaven is where, specifically, it's where the thing that you love the most is to be useful to other people, to do things that are of benefit to your neighbor. That's like the thing that I'm going to help the human race. That's the number one thing. You have the other stuff, like you have your, just want to relax and unwind, and but the main thing is love of service. That's what heaven is. That's what heaven is. And if you have heaven inside you, you're naturally drawn toward other people who have heaven inside them as well. And actually, depending on what kind, everyone's heaven is a little bit different. Everyone's state of love and wisdom is a little bit different. So, but you're drawn to particularly to people who are similar to you. And so people form what we call communities on the other side, that heaven is made up of countless communities of people, as many as there are different shades of passion for what is good and true. So people that are really similar to each other get together and they live in the same area. And it's not that different from here. There's people have homes, people have things they go to do, they have jobs, they have relationships, but it's just on another level of beauty and meaning and purpose. But it's recognizable. And so the heaven in totality is just everyone who has this heaven inside them. And actually that literally creates there's beautiful surroundings, but those are all a reflection of the things that are in the hearts and minds of. Swedenborg calls people who are in that state of heaven angels. That's what he uses. He says there's all just people who have moved into that state. To him, that's what an angel is. So he says that what's in the angel's heart and mind, it creates this amazing scenery around them, creates this amazing sort of atmospheres and even wildlife and things. But it's all a reflection of what's going on in the heart and mind. And that's all a reflection of how the divine enters each person. So heaven in general is you love knowing people are happy. You love other people's happiness and you want to make them happy. That's the thing that creates the happiness of heaven in you and the happiness of heaven for other people.
Okay. So then what happens immediately after we die?
Yes, right. So Swedenborg, I before said he had a bunch of near-death experiences, but I guess that's not near-death experiences. Often I feel like in modern usage, that's somebody who's had some kind of accident or physical danger to them, and that's what triggers the spiritual experience. Swedenborg his experiences were never prompted by that, so he was more just going in and out of the door whenever he wanted. But there was one time when he actually wrote about it in two different books in two different places, when he said he was shown what the dying process is like. And actually, the name of my YouTube channel is Off the Left Eye. Mm-hmm. And that is pulled from that account that he gave. And when I get to that part, I'll give you it. He said that he said his consciousness was maintained to a point where he could observe everything. But other than that, he went through the regular steps you'd go through when you're dying. So he says that what happened is first his body started to slow down. He could feel, what he said was his breathing slowing way down, although he could start to feel the breathing of his spirit, even though his body had almost stopped breathing. And he said it felt like there was a sort of a pull as his spirit got pulled out of his body. There were 3 phases that he went through immediately when he got to the other side. And they had to do with what kind of angels were around him. Again, the angels are people who have a particular kind of love and wisdom. And we talk about the levels of heaven. He says that there's 3 levels of heaven. And the reason there's 3 levels of heaven is because there's 3 levels in the human mind. And so depending on which levels of your mind are open, you're in different kinds of states of heaven. At first, when he crossed over, he was among the deepest, wisest angels. He calls them heavenly angels, or in some translations, it's celestial angels. But these are people who are they're led by love. So love is the thing that propels all their decision making. This is what they're all about. And there's angels that were around him and were curating the experience. They were making sure that he didn't get any uncomfortable thoughts, and making sure he wasn't worried or concerned. Then they're waiting until he was ready to be woken up. And as that was happening, as he was getting awakened, those angels moved off, because now he was coming into a new state of mind, and what he called spiritual angels or second level angels came around him, because second level angels are most motivated by truth. To Swedenborg, it's about love and wisdom, or goodness and truth, and the unity of the two. You see everything in this. He talks about how the sun gives off both heat and light, and that's an image. Heat is an image or correspondence to love. Light is a correspondence of truth. You see this everywhere. You see it in the heart and lungs, he says, is a picture of that in the human being, that actually God, the divine itself, is love and wisdom together. That's what it is. You have these sort of love angels and these wisdom angels, and they both want to help people, but they specialize in different things. So the spiritual angels, they're more about wisdom and cognitive stuff. So as he started to wake up, they were the ones with him. And he said it seemed like a covering was being rolled off of his left eye, by which he gained the use of spiritual sight. So everything is symbolic there. The left has to do with intellectual. By the way, Swedenborg, long before the science was settled, anticipated the modern discovery of the functions of the hemispheres of the brain through his spiritual experiences, because he was saying, oh yeah, the left has to do with the intellectual and the right has to do with the emotive, which sounds normal to us now, but it wasn't. Nobody knew that was true back then. He had these spiritual angels around him, and he says that they will do everything for you that you could possibly want. And angels never leave someone, but as soon as the person starts to get restless, they're allowed to go and start exploring the afterlife and find out where they fit. And this is something that it's self-led. You go around to different communities, meet different kind of people, experience different things. And during that time, he said, we all start in this place he called the world of spirits, which is sort of an initial, not a waiting room, but it's not too different from Earth, but it's where you're figuring out who you really are. And it's where you're sort of sorting out and figuring out where you belong. So you get to go and be among these different kinds of spirits and these different communities with their different ways of life, different things that they believe, different things they love. And you start to feel, I do fit here. I don't fit here. I want to move on, until you eventually find a place that feels like home to you. So much so that there's even a house there that you feel like, that's mine. That feels like mine. And according to Swedenborg, it's actually your home in heaven is a direct reflection of the mind that you have. And once you're there, as your mind grows, it changes with it. And that's a whole nother thing. But eventually you get to the point where you come to your community, and then you're settled and can begin your next phase of existence.
So he's talking about this form of community. I would say that sounds like you're talking about a frequency and a vibration that resonates with another frequency and vibration that matches what yours are. Is that anything he ever talked about, like in those kind of terms?
There wasn't really like a knowledge of a frequency, I don't think, back when he doesn't use those terms, but he talks a lot about like denser and lighter, and he talks about atmospheres or he talks about auras a lot. And if you have which your aura is just your heart and mind, or your feelings and thoughts emanating out from you. And then if that resonates with someone, he does talk about spiral. It's, again, you got this couple 100-year gap, so it's hard to know exactly when what he's talking about lines up with how we would describe it now. But the effects of love and wisdom in everyone can have a certain similarity to them. And when they do, he says, when you get into your community, it feels like you're among kindred spirits. It feels like even if you just are meeting these people for the first time, it feels like you've known them forever, because you have such a deep connection in that you have a similarity in what's deep in your heart.
So I'm wondering, maybe he talked about this, maybe he didn't, but when we get to heaven and we're coming back, in my perspective, you've had multiple lifetimes and you're, choosing to learn, grow, and you refine your soul in different ways. And it's not necessarily just an earthly incarnation. You could have lots of different incarnations that could do that. So is there a potential that you'll leave as one group and community, and you'll come back and you're in a completely different resonance and community based on what you did or didn't do, or how you functioned in this lifetime, with whether out of love or fear or wisdom or lack thereof?
I don't know. I think that there's no two people have ever been the same. No two people have ever been the same. And no two people ever can be the same to eternity. Swedenborg says he was talking with a couple of angels, and when the idea of two people being exactly the same came up, they were horrified. There's something about each person is something unique. And I think that there's a place that you belong. And there is a choice, as you're saying, for everyone. You can be good or bad. You can go and you just turn on the news. There's some people who are doing things that just warm your heart. And there's other people you're just like, I just cannot believe human beings are doing that to each other. I can't take living in this world. So you can choose where you want to go vertically, but it's like, if you're really negative, you're still in the same place. You're just way down low. So you're kind of opposite to the goodness that's there, but you're just diving into the opposite of it. So it seems like he actually said that the entirety of the spiritual world, it takes the human form in a certain way. So you mentioned before we were getting interviewed, I have this video on my channel called You Are the Lungs, which is about the human body. To Swedenborg, the human body is like the microcosm of everything. So you can see all the truth of existence written into the human body. In that, if you want to see what heaven is like, look at the body. That urge to help others and cooperate and get along, that's exactly what's going on in the body. Think of any individual cell in the body. What's it doing?
Helping it to the whole, right?
Helping. I'm going to give everything to the whole, and that's what I do. And I'm receiving everything I need from the whole, and that's what I do. And you said much earlier on in this interview that there's these different levels, but nobody's better than anyone else. Okay, because what's better, the eye or the foot? You know what?
I want them both. I want them both.
Yeah. You could. Some people might say, "Oh, well, the brain is so important." Okay, if you get rid of the skull, how's the brain going to do? Like in the body, everything is mutually dependent, and everything gives everything that it has to the whole. That is the form of heaven. That the people in heaven are in that same mindset. So you can actually see all of heaven. You have to be pretty wise to do this, but you can actually see all of heaven as a person. And people, angels who are in different communities, they can know I think I'm in like the kneecap community, because they understand what the kneecap does for the body, and they understand, well, like an easier to understand one is like the lungs. What the lungs do in the body is they draw in oxygen from that's outside, and they bring it in so then it can get to all the cells and they can do what they need. Swedenborg says that is wisdom or information. They're the people who are learning and then bringing that knowledge in to the rest of the human race. Somebody learned how to make I keep mentioning this equipment that where like the cameras and stuff, because it's so incredible that we can talk to each other. Somebody went out and figured out how to do that. It wasn't me, and it wouldn't have been me if I tried it for a million years. But somebody went out and figured out how to do that. And because they did it and they invented it, and people, now all of us can just use it easy, no problem. So that's kind of like the lungs pulling in oxygen and sending that to the whole body. Just like you have immune cells in the body. You're going to have people who it's their job to protect other people. And if there's bad things coming up that we shouldn't be doing, they're going to find a way to stop it. So all these communities, people in their communities can know, oh yeah, I think I'm in like the function of the eye or the kidney or the pancreas because of what I do for the human race. So there's a part of so I guess I mentioned all this because it's like where divine providence is trying to lead you, there's some place you really belong in that body that you were made for. You don't have to do it. You can go way down if you want if you think about cancer cells. What is that? That's cells who are like, I'm just going to grow for myself. That's it. I'm just growing for myself. And just doing that causes so much chaos. There's microbes and viruses, things that just like attack. You can act like that if you want, but you're still in your spot. You're just messing up your spot. And so it's an incredibly expansive spot. There's always freedom. People can do whatever they want forever, but there's just like a sort of a destiny that you can choose to embrace. There's that song, was it Billy? What was I made for? There's something that we are made for, and we'll never fully fulfill all that, but there's a spot that sort of we're called to.
Okay, that's a great segue to one of the questions I have for you. Why does Swedenborg say that we come here?
So everything has outer and inner layers to it in order for it to function. Your body has skin, all this cool stuff we were talking about before, pancreas and all that. It's in trouble if there's no skin. Looking vertically, as we were saying, if you don't have a foot and you don't have legs, all these internal organs, that's in trouble. There has to be an outer layer that allows for the inner layers to do what they're doing. In the world, we are like the foundation of heaven. So actually, the two worlds are so intertwined. It's more like the skin and than the muscles and bones. Like they're that interdependent on each other. So the angels couldn't exist without you being here and doing what you're doing. So the kinds of thoughts and feelings that you have, things you're pursuing, you provide like the foundation for what they're doing in their heaven and everything. So there's a couple of things that we're doing here. One is we are developing and being who we are. We're starting out life and we're growing, and you can see this in every kid and child. But also we are providing a use to the people that are here. So there's something you're doing in this world to help other people. then you are also providing a use to heaven while you're here. So I actually just recently did a short video. The point of being on earth is to learn heavenly behavior and do it. So you're always, every moment of every day, you have a choice to love what's good and true. And by acting on that and by not acting on what's negative and false, you make the goodness and truth part of who you are. And because we're doing that in the freedom and ambiguity of life, it really becomes part of who you are. So you're making yourself into that angel.
Wow, that's a beautiful explanation. I really love that. I heard that. I heard that.
Cool.
What did he have to say, if anything, about past lives and reincarnation?
Not much. We did a show where we looked into some of, he doesn't really mention much about it. He did say that sometimes people can get memories that are actually from the community that they're in. Like your spirit's in a community and everything in the afterlife is communal. So there you can actually share feelings. Like here we can try to share feelings. I can try to speak passionately and try to arouse it, but there you can actually here's how I'm feeling. Now you're feeling it. And
Hmm.
same thing with knowledge, that when you come into a community of people, you also come into all the knowledge that they had. So even people who had a good heart in this world but yet hadn't learned that much, when they come into their heavenly community, they suddenly know all these things. So because of the communal nature of that, there's times when we can remember things that they've done, other people in that community. That's the closest he's come to talking about it. But to him, he was very focused on the importance of this life that we're living right now and the dynamism. He talks about a lot of things that happen in the afterlife that are like reincarnation. So he talks about all these cycles of learning and change. Anyway, we did an episode called "Do We Reincarnate?" where we talk about it. The people will have things that sound a lot like reincarnation within the spiritual world. But yeah, he doesn't give too much detail on it.
Okay, interesting. I was just curious. There's
Sure.
one thing that I really, really want to ask.
Okay.
Okay, so I heard in one of your videos that you said that no one is restricted from heaven. So will you explain what that means according to Swedenborg and what he discovered about that?
Yes, there's a prevailing idea out there among people who believe in a afterlife with heaven and hell in it, that it's like heaven is like a gated community where you can't go in there. You would want to, because if you were in there, you'd be happy and there's all kinds of great stuff in there, but you can't because you didn't do whatever God wanted you to do. According to Swedenborg, everyone's allowed to go wherever they want to go in the afterlife. However, heaven is the state of mutual love and the joy in helping other people. If
So
you
that's the
have that,
code to get in, is that
no,
being resonating with that mutual love.
yes, if you have, it's all about what you enjoy in your life. If you have made the joy of your life when you're living here, what I love to do is I love to cut people down and insult people. I like to get my way, dominate people. I like to exploit people, kill people. And that's what the joy is in me. How is it going to feel for me going into this place of mutual love? I'm going to hate it. He actually said that what you love makes you who you are. That is what makes your life. So if you have a love of the things that are opposite of heaven, there's certain chemicals when you put them together. If you put magnesium and water, I think it is, it explodes. That's how it is. If you take a malicious heart and try to walk into heaven, you don't enjoy it at all. You feel like you can't even breathe there because this is not what you like. You would rather go and be around people who are like you and enjoy the same kind of things. And that's where everybody goes to, where they want to go, where they feel comfortable. And there's heaven and hell. It's like anyone can go anywhere they want. Heaven is the joy of helping other people and encouraging their happiness. Hell is the joy of harming people and loving yourself alone above everyone else. The two are opposites, but it's self-selecting opposites.
And it doesn't sound like it's a place. It sounds like it's a state of being, which makes sense because that is exactly what I experienced when I was out of my body. It was a state of being, it wasn't a place.
Yeah, he says that in the spiritual world, there's no time and space. There are only states. He actually calls them states instead.
Interesting. I love it. It resonates so much. So, where do people connect with if they want to learn more about Swedenborg? It sounds like he was a prolific in these dream journals and in these books and in these journals of his astral travel for 30 years. Like I can't I write signs down that I get and I can fill up a book of signs in 2 years. I can't imagine how many notebooks I would have if I was connecting every day with the other side.
Yeah, he did. He had 30 volumes of published material. And that's not counting his entire journal of spiritual experiences that he kept for decades. That wasn't published. So he just was incredibly driven and productive. That's just how he'd been before the whole thing started. To him, he said that his life before his spiritual awakening had been preparing him for the spiritual awakening. So everything that he learned about how to publish and write, everything he learned about human anatomy, everything that he learned about all the sciences, that was the foundation. He wasn't dismissive of it. He didn't say, well, who cares about this science now that I'm spiritual? He said that allowed me to do it. So he wrote a ton. So what my channel on YouTube is, which is Off the Left Eye, to search for Off the Left Eye or Swedenborg. It's to try to ease people into it. So that's a great place to start. We have over 1,200 videos just
Oh my
exploring
gosh, how long have you been doing this?
1,000 years. No, we've been
Yeah,
doing
it
it
feels like it.
in internet years. It's about 1,000 years. I think I put my first video up in 2010.
That's a
So
long time
that's a
ago.
long, but I don't feel like, well, we've almost put everything out. We're almost done. I just feel like I'm just scratching the surface on the material.
Wow.
It's so deep. But going there is great. I work for the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation, which has been around for 170 years, and it's been basically to keep his books in print. You can download a number of his books for free at
Where do you go to do
Swedenborg,
that?
Swedenborg.com.
Okay.
You can get, yeah, you can get quite a get a lot of them as free PDF files.
Really
So,
generous. That's amazing.
well, no, we're not for profit, and well, it's for me, like if everybody was thirsty and you went and discovered, oh, there's water under the ground here, you'd want to just, come on, everyone, there's water right here. That's kind of how I feel about Swedenborg. Like we have to try to keep our operations going, so we solicit donations, and if you're going to get like a physical book, we have to charge for it, because otherwise we will run out of money really
Sure,
quick.
of course.
But if we can, we like putting out free stuff. That's why I make all these YouTube videos. They're free. We just put out the books as much as we can, because it's important, and I think it's like kind of, everybody deserves to have access to it. So that's the model we try to run. You can get free books at Swedenborg.com, free videos at youtube.com/off the left eye. If you go to our channel and watch any of our videos and put a comment on any one of them anywhere, we have a team of people who will respond to you. If you want to ask us a question, early on when I started putting Swedenborg on the internet, I thought nobody would be interested. I thought, this is too weird. Nobody's going to be into it. So when I first started to get any comments from people, I was just like, oh, I'm going to answer every single comment. So now we've kept up the ability to do that. So if you want to get in touch with us, leave a comment there, or there's a contact form on Swedenborg.com. We'd love to chat with anyone.
That's super generous. Oh my gosh, Curtis, I feel like I super connect with you. We resonate. Like it's really cool. And I can't even tell you how much, like I have tears in my eyes a little bit, because when I have conversations like this, it really feeds my soul, because this is the whole thing that I'm trying to do. I want everybody to feel powerful. I don't want anybody to feel like they're living this life and they have to have all this fear, and that there are certain things that checklists that they have to do. It's really as simple as coming into the state of love. And that's really where we're all supposed to be. And I feel like when we do, that's when we find our true power. And I feel
Yeah.
like this is what your channel is all about, what your message is. And to learn about somebody who was talking about this stuff like 400 years ago, like he sounds like an ascended master to me. That's what he sounds like.
I think he was ahead of his time, and I'm just happy to let people know that's accessible. It is all about what you're saying. You don't, especially if we talked about being sort of refined through hard times. If you've ever been miserable and lonely and afraid, you know what that's, and you don't want anyone to have to go through it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. So what you're talking about, what you're doing with your channel, what I'm doing with mine, the reason why I love the message in Swedenborg's writings, I sometimes refer to them as they've been my best friend, because whenever I get worried, whenever I get scared, or feel like it can't work out, what it says in there about what life is really about calms me, and it nurtures happiness and hope, and puts me on a path where, yeah, I can feel powerful. I can feel like there's a point to life, and like there's something that it all is going to work out. Everything is going to be okay, and I can have joy. I think that is the intent of all spiritual wisdom, is to get people into that state. So I'm happy to get to have these kind of conversations too. And I want to thank you again for letting me be a part of this.
It really sounds like it's making the things that were previously felt to be unsolvable, solvable.
That's a great way to put it. Yep.
Thank you so much for all of your sharing all of this wisdom. I can tell you put a lot of time into everything you do. Also, everybody check out his videos. He has some of the most incredible videos with the graphics and the way that they feel that I've ever watched. So I encourage everybody to check that out. Thank you again so much. And thank you everybody for watching.
Bye-bye.